The story began with the great central empire of Cybin, ruled by a merciful and kind emperor. Thanks to him, the empire flourished in wealth, harmony, and harmony. People lived happily. However, there was one group which, being in the shadows, tried to destroy this idol. Such organizations acted not only against the emperor or the empire itself, but they had to be got rid of secretly. This is necessary so that the surface union does not learn about the fact that there was also an underground union. Therefore, in order to preserve the peaceful life of people, the so-called guard dog was raised. And this dog was given the ability to be above all laws by the emperor himself. This allowed him to suppress the underground union. Watchdog was quite cold-blooded and calculating. He was capable of everything to achieve the goal set before them. No one would have ever thought that something like this person could stop him, force him to change his character and true desires. He himself could not have known about it, and even more so could not have guessed about it, but one day a girl appeared who decided to tame this cold-blooded guard dog. The sun was shining brightly above the palace of a noble lord. A man was sitting in one of the rooms with his wife and daughter. He told his daughter that it was time to find a husband for her. Hearing this, the lady almost choked on her tea and asked her father about it. The man was somewhat indignant because he thought that his daughter wanted to go against his will, although her sisters were married for his needs. She immediately replied that she did not dare to think anything like that, but in her mind, of course, she planned to give up this idea, because even her sisters begged the girl never to agree to such a marriage. The father calmed down and let his daughter go, promising to take over all the preparations as soon as he found her a groom. The girl obeyed and bowed and left the room. Anger did not subside. The lady confidently declared to herself that she would not allow anyone to control her life. Having closed the door behind her, she stood for some time indignant that she had no right even in terms of choosing a husband. The girl was determined to find a groom herself, because she did not want her fate to turn out the same as her sisters. The lady was sure that the task should not be too difficult. The first place where she decided to start her search was the ball, but only when she was there she realized almost immediately that she was very wrong about her capabilities, because she was here for the first time and did not know anyone. This situation made the girl very upset, but only not for a while, because in a moment she was again winged by her confidence that this was not the end. But to begin with, she decided to have a snack. After looking at the table filled with sweets, the girl approached and quickly began to fill her tray, but did not stop there, seeing several more cakes. She did not notice how the cake fell. While she was enjoying the goodies, one of the ladies slipped on a cake that had fallen from her plate a little earlier. The stranger hit hard, but what made her angry the most was that the dress was ruined. In the end, the girl noticed that one of the cakes was missing, and almost immediately the stranger started cursing heavily in the direction of the scoundrel who was scattering food here. The lady wanted to run away faster. The girl understood that only curses from this lady would not happen. Without saying a word, she hurried to leave the scene of the crime. Having found herself on the balcony alone, she continued to eat, apologizing in her mind. Suddenly, someone called out, distracting her from the meal. Looking around, the girl noticed that a handsome young man was approaching her. The guy started the conversation with the fact that he already guessed that she was the culprit. The lady did not immediately understand what it was about, because unexpectedly for herself, she was distracted by the appearance of the gentleman. She accidentally dropped one cake again and wanted to pick it up, but she was stopped. The boy assured that he was not going to step on the sweet and fall. The girl thought he was a bit strange but didn't say so. Instead, the lady quickly bowed and introduced herself. He also introduced himself as Alphonse Midford. Although it was their first meeting, Esmeralda had never heard of this young man's lineage, but she thought he was from a noble family. The girl thanked him for not exposing her, even though he knew the truth. The young man said that it was not worth thanks, because he himself did not want to fan the conflict, even though it would be funny. The girl couldn't stand it, and bursting with laughter, began to laugh even harder, telling the lord that she really liked his joke. He assured her that she too would laugh at it if she saw it in person. She replied that she was busy escaping at the moment. He even felt a little sorry for it. The lady realized that my lord was quite an interesting person, so she decided to ask something while coming from afar. The guy replied that he was not against any absurd things. Seizing the moment, the girl asked if he would like to try a romantic relationship with her. It surprised and interested him. The young man did not immediately come up with an answer, but the lady took it as something positive because he did not immediately refuse. She said that she had little time and no choice, so she would wait for his letter. Esmeralda gave him a week to think. Alphonse agreed and decided to end their meeting there. Having made a polite gesture, he made quite an impression on the lady. Her heart sank. Returning to the hall, one of his acquaintances pounced on him. His friend asked him if he had fun and how he liked the ball in general. Midford admitted that he met an unusual girl. Harrow was intrigued, so he decided to ask a little more, to which he received an interesting answer, because the lady offered a man she barely knew to enter into a relationship with her. The friend was very surprised. The young man was surprised that this lady was able to offer such a thing so easily, because the other girls were even afraid to say a word to Alphonse. At most, they watched from afar. Milord did not hide that he was interested in this. Esmeralda was still standing alone on the balcony, looking up at the starry sky. However, the girl did not need company because she could not get this mysterious lord and their agreement out of her head. The day they had agreed on was soon to approach, and the lady was still expecting an answer from the lord, but he still did not answer. The girl began to worry about it, and the thought of it was depressing. Suddenly, a carriage arrived at her family's palace. A servant came out of it and handed the letter to the lady. Esmeralda was genuinely surprised by this because she did not expect to receive an answer. She started reading. In it, Alphonse announced that he had decided to accept the lady's proposal and also invited her to his palace in a carriage that he had sent to have a little talk with her in person. The girl was shining. The coachman asked the girl if she accepted the proposal of the lord. The lady agreed to get into the carriage without any objections, but almost immediately stopped herself because she realized that she looked very careless. She asked the coachman to wait a little while she changed her clothes and ran headlong into the room, thinking about what would be better to wear. The maids were already waiting for her in the rooms and helped her get dressed. The girl was satisfied with her outfit, so she ran outside without wasting another minute, but on the stairs she unexpectedly met her mother, who inquired about her daughter's haste. The lady began to think of giving up. The lady understood that she could not tell about Midford now, so she simply replied that she had to meet a friend. Mum thought it was strange, but the girl ran, promising that she would return soon. She mentally apologized to the woman for this behavior, but promised herself to tell her mother everything later. When she was on the street, she stopped in front of the carriage, but in a moment she happily entered the middle. After a while they arrived at a huge palace that looked more like a king's castle. The girl's mouth fell open as she approached the door. She was very worried but forced herself to calm down. After knocking on the gate, the butler immediately opened it. The man greeted the lady, and she said that she had come here at the invitation of my lord. The servant smiled warmly and said that she was already expected. The butler led the lady inside, and she began to look around the huge palace with admiration. As she followed the servant, she wondered how the lord earned a living once he was able to afford such a luxury. When they reached the room, a servant knocked and announced that Lady Vanes had arrived. Alphonse invited her inside, and the man bowed and wished her a good time. The girl thanked and went in. Midford immediately came out to meet her. The lady once again thought that the boy was very handsome, but immediately dismissed these thoughts. Milord greeted and invited to the table. He apologized for sending the invitation so suddenly and was glad she accepted it. Esmeralda reassured him because, on the contrary, she was happy about it. The young man led her to a chair and she sat down. Milord again apologized for the late answer, but the girl just waved it off and said that she did not see any fault in it, because such a question had to be thought through and she understood it. In addition, she was quite impressed that his answer was positive. He took her words as the official beginning of their romantic relationship. Delighted by this, she offered to change the appeal. He did not immediately understand what the girl meant, and she explained that they should start calling each other by their first names. Milord laughed somewhat at this and immediately agreed. She also smiled to herself. The girl began to treat her, but the lord interrupted her because he decided to clarify the status of her family, which had a county. The lady confirmed and realized that there was still a lot they didn't know about each other. Alphonse said that this is exactly why he called her to meet. The lady saw that he was very attentive. In a moment, the milord introduced himself and stated his status as a Marquis as well as his true purpose. The boy said that he was in the service of the Imperial family as a guard dog, and his duties included getting rid of the Emperor's obstacles, destroying the evil plans of the Shadow Society. The girl listened in silence, but could not believe what she heard, so she looked questioningly at my lord. The Marquis did not explain anything further, but immediately asked if the lady was ready for such tests next to him. The girl was stunned by this and did not know what to answer. Of course she wanted to choose a husband for herself, but she did not expect at all that she would get someone who would be in some incomprehensible position. Esmeralda wanted to give up her venture in a more civilized way. The lady started giving back, and with an innocent expression on her face, said that the parents may not give the blessing because they are waiting for marriage. With this statement, the girl was sure that the Marquis himself would get scared and give her back, but the reaction of the gentleman quite surprised her because he simply smiled and said that he understood what was being said. It wasn't even an hour before they arrived at her family's residence and were already sitting in the room in front of her father. The Marquis began the conversation and asked the Count to give his blessing to the relationship with his daughter. The girl was sure that her father would not agree to this, but the man, hearing this proposal, did not even think for a long time and gave his consent. The lady wanted to say something because she did not expect it. The Marquis thanked the Count for the permission. The man knew that his daughter was not the most ideal, but he was sure that he would trust her in good hands. Alphonse promised that he would take good care of his bride. Hearing the men's conversation, the girl saw that her father bought into the fact that the groom had the status of a Marquis and because of his connections with the Imperial family, but she also somewhat understood that not only this played a role. Midford also asked if the Earl would mind if he invited his daughter to his palace. The girl immediately raised her voice, because this invitation was too sudden, so she hoped for her father's refusal. However, even this hope disappeared very quickly, because the Count gave permission almost immediately. The lady immediately wanted to oppose this, but the husband did not listen and only told her not to cause problems for the Marquis. Esmeralda began to give up after hearing this. She also understood that this agreement was supposed to develop into a future marriage, so she knew that her father would be angry if the relationship ended without marriage. She was in despair. That was the end of the meeting, and the Marquis and the lady went to his palace. Alphonse said that as he said, everything turned out well, so there was no need to worry. The girl smiled and agreed. However, inside she could not calm down, because all her plans for a sham marriage had gone in vain. So now it was possible to forget about everything. The girl was disappointed, but tried not to show it. In a moment, the Marquis admitted the true reason why he had taken so long to answer. He told the lady that he had been busy preparing the room for her all this week. She was even more upset. When they returned to the Marquis's residence, the servants immediately led the girl to her rooms. Of course, the look was too luxurious, so the lady was genuinely impressed. She liked the room very much and thanked me. Midford also provided his bride with one maid who would serve her from now on. Lillian bowed politely in greeting. With that, he said goodbye, expecting to meet again at dinner. Saying goodbye, the lady was beaming, but quickly stopped herself because she did not want to fall in love only with the cute face of the Marquis. The maid raised her voice and offered the young lady to change into more comfortable clothes. The girl agreed, and while she was changing clothes and preparing for dinner, this time imperceptibly came. The lady came to the great hall, where there was a huge table set for two. Marquis helped her sit down. Alphonse wanted to continue the conversation at the table, which he did not want to reveal ahead of time. The girl asked what role she would have to play in all this, but the boy reassured her, assuring her that there was nothing complicated. However, the lady did not immediately want to believe it, because she knew that the Emperor's family was involved, so she clarified whether she would be in any danger. The Marquis promised that nothing would happen to her. The girl thought about it and wanted to agree, but she stopped for a moment because she noticed some snag in this conversation. Esmeralda understood that the Marquis wanted to use her in his sweet plans. Alphonse stopped for a moment, looking for an answer, because he realized that the girl had exposed him. Nevertheless, he said that all this was not true and that the lady first of all liked him. The lady was pleasantly surprised. A little shaken by these pleasant words, the girl motivatedly answered that she was ready to help him with his work, so they should both work hard for the sake of this relationship. The Marquis smiled at this. That was the end of the important conversation, and the couple started dinner. The next morning the lady did not want to wake up, but the maid came to wake her up and served the young lady breakfast. Lillian placed a tray of lunch nearby. On it were herbal tea, sweet pastries, and a baguette. The girl began to eat breakfast with pleasure. Pausing for a moment, the lady asked the Marquis's servants. The maid informed that the gentleman was now busy in his office. The girl quickly got herself together and went to the groom. She quietly knocked on the door and the young man let her in. The lady walked in slowly. Esmeralda greeted and approached the table. The Marquis immediately hid the letter he had been reading. He immediately began to ask about her dream so that she would not pay attention to the letter. The lady answered. The girl thought that she could distract the Marquis from work, so she decided to come over later, but he said that he was not very busy. In addition, I wanted to inform you that I want to have a ball today. He also emphasized that it would be a masquerade ball, so he asked if the girl did not mind accompanying him. The lady immediately imagined herself and the groom in beautiful masks, so she did not want to deny it. Gathering the entire image into a heap, she even danced with pleasure. The Marquis distracted her a little and said that she still needed to choose a dress, and she supported the conversation and said about the masks. The Marquis laughed at this and slowly got up from the table. Approaching the bride, he led her to the exit and went out with her to inform the servants about the preparations. An open letter lay on the table. The evening has come. All the invited guests began to gather at the palace. The Marquis and the lady were already waiting for the guests to arrive, and they were dressed almost identically. Esmeralda was fascinated by so many people. The girl asked Alphonse whether they could come only by invitation. He confirmed. Suddenly a servant came to them and handed over a letter, after which the master took his bride inside. She followed. They approached the door, and opening it, a wonderful picture opened before the lady. The guests have already started the entertainment. Some danced, some talked. The atmosphere seemed pleasant and joyful. Esmeralda was very impressed and told the Marquis that the atmosphere was very mysterious, which made her like everything. The guy was glad that it made a big impression on the lady. He stopped for a moment. Suddenly, Midford said that he would like to let the lady enjoy the atmosphere of the ball some more, but he still had work to do. She was shocked, because she did not understand what other work could be now. The guy explained. Marquis said that it was not a simple masquerade ball. The young man admitted that there was an auction here, where they traded expensive, kind of, pets. The lady did not immediately understand what was being said. The servant who delivered the letter explained that they were not trading in dogs or cats, as the lady had first thought, but in people. Esmeralda was visibly shocked. She did not understand how this was possible. The Marquis thanked the lady for the fact that thanks to her, he was able to get to this ball, because the man himself could not get here. Alphonse took her hands and thanked her once again for this opportunity. He also noted that he would still need her help in the future. The girl was fired up by this, so she began to ask what else she would need to do. He asked her to participate in the auction. The lady was stunned. Seeing her reaction, Alphonse quickly reassured her and told her not to worry, because no one would sell her. It seemed that the girl did not listen to him, because she thought that she would become a commodity. She did not have time to ask him anything else, because two bulky men came up and immediately approached the Marquis. Midford told them that this girl was another lot, after which she was captured. They said the Marquis approached her to whisper in her ear to keep closer to the man with wings, and in that case, to say that she was sent by Dr. V. At that point, she was taken away and locked in some kind of cell. The girl leaned against the lattice, feeling like a fool, because she expected that this ball would be something like a date. But everything turned out to be completely different. A sudden loud knocking on the grate distracted the lady from her thoughts. One of the men who captured her told her to keep quiet if she wanted to meet a good owner. Esmeralda was surprised. Turning her head, the girl finally noticed the other slaves who were in the cell. Among them was a child who was crying bitterly. Others almost howled with grief, but hid their despair. Examining each of those present, she suddenly noticed exactly the one whom the bridegroom told her to follow. The winged boy stood far from everyone, even hunkered down a little in a corner and turned his back. Realizing that it was with him that she needed to keep close, the girl tried to do just that and slowly began to approach the stranger. But she was noticed and angrily began to say something. However, the girl did not understand at all what this stranger with wings wanted to tell her, because she did not know his language. After speaking, the boy turned around and walked away even further than he had been. Suddenly, someone entered the cell and, approaching the boy, grabbed him by the hair and began to drag him somewhere. Esmeralda saw all this and realized that it was a problem, so she had to do something. She began to ask where to drag this guy, to which the security guard replied that the auction was about to start, and it was already time for him to go on stage. The lady blocked the exit and told them to take her away. The guard did not like that she spoke to him in such a tone and wanted to hit her, but she managed to shout out the secret words that the Marquis told her. The lady said she was sent by Dr. V. It worked, and the man stopped at the last moment. Eventually, he let her follow. Walking down the corridor, the lady thought about what to do next. She looked at the stranger. The young man was very angry. Finally, they arrived at their destination. When the curtains were opened, Esmeralda even covered her eyes, so bright was the light in the hall. The lady looked shocked at the present guests, who covered their faces. Looking into their eyes, she saw that these people did not perceive either her or that boy as people at all, which made her very angry. The lady stepped forward and shouted to the hall that this auction was an ugly thing. It became very quiet in the hall. The orator who announced the auction turned sharply to her and raised his hand in rebuke and cursed angrily. The lady closed her eyes, preparing for the blow, which did not happen. She heard someone's voice and slowly opened her eyes. The girl saw the Marquis, who firmly held the guard's hand, preventing him from hitting the bride. Esmeralda had never been so happy to see him. The Marquis praised her for a beautifully played role. Suddenly, the rest of the guards pounced on him, and she didn't have time to warn him about it. But Alfonso didn't need it, because he already felt it himself. He turned sharply towards the enemies and repulsed their attack without too much effort. The men were thrown in different directions, but did not rise again. Midford still stood waiting for new attacks, but there were none. The stranger and Esmeralda silently watched the elegant movements of the Marquis, and the winged even whistled at this sight. Alphonse withdrew his weapon and announced that everyone in the hall was under arrest. The guests began to protest, shouting how this unknown person dared to arrest them. The Marquis took off his mask and publicly said that he had been sent for this by the Emperor himself. People started running towards the exit. However, no one had time to cross the border of this hall because before the exit, Harrow was already waiting with a considerable number of soldiers and reported that the building was already surrounded. The guests stopped, despair in their eyes. While the Marquis's companion was busy arresting everyone present, Esmeralda looked joyfully at her fiancé again. She was still sitting on the floor and held out her hand to meet him, but he passed by. The girl was quite surprised at this disregard. Instead, Alphonse immediately approached the winged stranger, who was actually the Prince of Akron Kingdom, and helped him free himself from the ropes. The prince was surprised that the Marquis knew his language, but did not pay attention, instead pointing to the lady who had to get up on her own. Midford thought that she had somehow offended His Majesty. The prince replied that the lady did not harm him in any way. On the contrary, she was very determined, which saved them both. She was a really amazing girl. The Marquis was pleasantly surprised by this and thanked him. In the end, all those responsible for participating in the auction were arrested. As they stood outside watching this, Esmeralda was still resentful of the groom, even though Alphonse praised her for the successful performance. She ignored it and continued to scold him that his purpose was not a date, but only a mission. The Marquis was surprised because he thought that the lady had time to enjoy the atmosphere of the ball. The girl replied that only 5 minutes or even less. At that, she turned around and wanted to leave, but the boy stopped her. Taking his hand, he promised that they would spend the next time together. Milady was shocked by this, but forced herself to quickly come to her senses because she promised herself not to let such a thing slip from his hands. Suddenly, Harrow approached them, and the Marquis turned his attention to his friend. Having greeted the Marquis, he immediately paid attention to the girl and approached her to introduce himself. The boy was pleasantly surprised that Alphonse had a lover. The lady was not so sure about it. She remembered again that the Marquis did not understand the whole situation at all and thought that being at the ball for 5 minutes was more than enough, so he did not attach importance to it as a date. The lady became even more angry. Meanwhile, Midford asked his friend whether everything was fine with the delay of the criminals. Harrow hesitated a little, and the Marquis realized that something was wrong, so he approached him to find out what exactly. From under his jacket, the comrade took out some black flour, but one look at it was enough for the Marquis to understand everything. The boy also said that he found the beast in a secret room together with the flour. All together, they went down to this secret room and saw some strange animal that was locked behind a grate. The animal began to beat strongly against the grate and growl, trying to get out. Seeing the unknown beast, Esmeralda backed away in fright. Alphonse only looked at the animal for a moment and immediately understood who had put his hand behind the creation of this creature and turned sharply. Harrow asked the Marquis what he planned to do next. Midford replied that he was going to burn everything here and then destroy all the remains. The comrade did not doubt it, but the lady tried to stop him. She approached the Marquis and decided to ask for an unknown flower because she did not understand what was in it. He was silent for a moment, but finally agreed that the girl also had a right to know about it. While the Marquis was talking about the mysterious group that was responsible for what had happened, they were hiding in the forest, and one of them was watching what was happening at the ball and reported everything. The second man was angry because he knew that the Marquis planned to burn the chimera, on which he had spent a lot of time and money. The woman calmly returned to their leader and asked about further actions. The man calmly leaned back on the stone and told everyone not to worry about it, but neither the woman nor the scientist were satisfied with this because they could lose the gold vein. Besides, many people were arrested. However, even this did not make any impression on the main one. It even started to amuse him more because he thought that it would be even more fun this way. At this point, his colleagues did not ask any more questions. Esmeralda heard the voice of her parents scolding her for not behaving like a lady and for thinking about something extra. Her main task was to get married. The girl covered her ears as hard as she could. However, even that did not allow her to fully protect herself from this angry tone that screamed her name at the top of her lungs. Suddenly, she heard a quieter voice calling her, and the girl finally opened her eyes. She quickly jumped up and looked around, realizing that she was in a room with Alphonse sitting next to her. It was he who called her. The groom asked about her well-being. The lady quickly apologized for falling asleep during the conversation. The Marquis noticed the tired look of the bride, so he suggested to postpone the conversation for another time, but the girl began to say that everything was fine and said that she didn't sleep well, but now she will concentrate. The Marquis smiled and remembered that they had indeed returned very late yesterday, and the lady was very tired. So he was not surprised that due to the stress she had experienced, the girl could have had a bad night's sleep that night. The girl started a conversation and asked if everything was okay with the Prince of Akron Kingdom. Alphonse remembered His Majesty's praise of the lady yesterday and said that thanks to her, the war had been prevented. She breathed a sigh of relief, but there was one more question that bothered her. It was about the flower they found yesterday. Marquis told her everything briefly, but she wanted to know more. The boy was silent for a moment, but finally said that these were abnormal people, a combination of those who wanted to overthrow the power of the emperor and those who were dissatisfied with the current system, with terrible deeds. And the girl already guessed that yesterday's auction was one of these actions. The Marquis confirmed and also said that they did in general everything that was forbidden. It also applied to that chimera. Midford also said that they had not yet managed to catch all the criminals, but they knew for sure that there was also a scientist in this group, Dr. Victoire. The girl realized that this doctor with whom she was hiding. The Marquis confirmed and continued. He said that the doctor was like an evil genius and even conducted such experiments that were forbidden because they went beyond the boundaries of ethics and morality, creating monsters. He didn't even want to imagine what else such people could create if they were given free rein. The girl understood that the responsibility for their delay fell on the shoulders of the Marquis, and he confirmed it, Esmeralda thought. In the end, she said that she had one request for him, and he was ready to listen. She was aware that yesterday's incident had shown her how defenseless she was, so eventually the time will come when it will become a burden for the Marquis altogether. However, she did not want to give up so easily, and expressed her request that he teach her how to wield a sword. The boy was stunned for a moment by this. However, Esme didn't want to give up. She said that she already had a basic idea about it, so she once again asked very strongly that her wish be granted. The Marquis looked at her, seeing the light in his eyes. Alphonse sighed, but agreed. He promised that he would talk to Lillian about it. The girl did not understand why the Marquis would entrust this to a maid. He explained that the maid was an excellent swordsman. Midford said that first, the girl would need to learn the basics of being a maid, and then he promised to work with her personally. Esmeralda was extremely happy about this. Suddenly there was a knock on the room. Garrow looked into the room. The Marquis quickly got up from his chair, asking his comrade when he had arrived. The guy said he was in a bit of a hurry, so he had to wait. Finally, he returned to the lady. Before that, he had not been able to present himself properly, but now he had this opportunity. He bowed slightly and introduced himself as the second prince of the Empire. The girl was stunned and quickly crouched in a curtsy. She apologized for not getting to know him in a certain way before this, but the boy laughed at it and reassured her, because he was not one to be bothered by such etiquette. He was just a friend of Alphonse. The prince already knew what role the lady had played in yesterday's incident and openly accused his friend of not doing the right thing, so to make amends, he invited them both to the ball. Of course, Esmeralda was happy, and although the ball was still 3 days away, she was already thinking about the outfits and entertainment. The prince showed the Marquis with a kind reproach how happy the lady was. He smiled. Alphonse decided to make his own contribution to the ball, to which they will go, so he promised to give the bride a dress especially for this. Out of joy, the girl began to dance around the room. The boys laughed. The next day, the Marquis and Milady went to town. Alphonse, as he promised, wanted to buy her a dress, but decided that the girl should choose it for herself. She was extremely happy about it. They entered the salon, where there was a whole bunch of beautiful dresses. The Marquis sat down in one of the chairs and said he would wait for Esmeralda here while she chose her outfit. The girl disappeared from sight in a moment. However, she returned in a moment and warned that it might take some time, but he was ready to wait, and the girl disappeared again. She strolled between rows of dresses of various styles and designs. She had been looking at dresses for some time, but she couldn't find the right one. One looked too vulgar, the other was too childish, but in the end, she found something that shone in her eyes like the sun. The girl quickly approached this dress and tried to remove it from the mannequin, but suddenly someone also pulled it onto themselves. Esme looked over to see another lady who wasn't about to give in. The girls started arguing among themselves about who noticed this dress first, but the stranger seemed to have the upper hand. For a moment, Vanes stopped, and looking closely, began to remember that the girl was familiar to her. The girl finally remembered that this lady was the same one who had slipped on the cake she had accidentally thrown away. Nevertheless, the lady did not want to let go of the only dress that she liked very much. Of course, the stranger also did not want to give in, which is why the fight between the two ladies did not stop. A salesman even approached them to appease them, but no one was going to listen to him. The sounds of the altercation had already reached the Marquis himself, but he was sitting in a chair sipping tea and trying not to pay any attention to it. Meanwhile, the seller only added fuel to the fire. The man said that this dress was only produced in one copy this season, so one of the ladies would still have to give in. Hearing this, the stranger clutched her dress even harder. The girl started shouting that she should wear this dress. Esmeralda also began to pull the dress towards her, saying the same words. The seller politely tried to stop both young ladies. It is not known how long this altercation would last, which was suddenly interrupted by the Marquis. He approached the stranger and pointed to a dress that he said would suit her red hair and figure better. This made a strong impression on the stranger, and she finally let go of the dress for which she had been fighting for so long. Esme watched in shock as her fiancé chose a dress for another and even gave it as a gift. The seller said that this dress is now hers, but she did not hear him. The girl was still looking at the Marquis, who slowly approached her and praised her for her excellent choice. The lady thanked a little weakly. When they drove back to his palace, the girl couldn't take her sad gaze away from the window. The Marquis noticed that the lady had behaved too quietly during the journey, so he asked if anything was bothering her. She said something quietly, and then sharply turned her head towards him. The look was somewhat indignant and even angry. However, Milady did not want to say anything specific. She just said that she wanted to think. She got out of the carriage by herself and did not even take his hand. Without looking him in the eye, the girl immediately said that she was going to attend a fencing lesson immediately. The Marquis was surprised by such haste. Nevertheless, Alphonse did not object and said that he would go to warn Lillian. The lady did not want to admit to him that in fact she showed herself quite well at foil fencing. She went to get ready. While she was putting on the appropriate clothes and doing her hair, she was already mentally apologizing to the maids that today she would release steam on the poor woman, but she was not going to give any concessions today. Milady had been very confident before the class, but a few minutes of fencing against Lillian knocked that pride out of her. Esmeralda had never expected that there would be such a gap in their abilities. However, Waynes was still forced to accept defeat and praised the maid for such high abilities. The servant herself was no less impressed by the talents of my lady, because she did not expect such from the Count's daughter. Nevertheless, the maid made a couple of remarks about the lady's mistakes, because she attacked too openly and the movements were too wide. It even seemed to the servant that the ladies were overcome with emotion. Esme admitted that she was right. Milady told about the incident in the dress salon. The girl was overcome with resentment that the Marquis dared to be nice to another lady, and most importantly, he did not help her choose a dress, but did it for some stranger, Lillian thought. She said that she understood the lady's feelings, but also emphasized that this was the Marquis's first relationship, so she asked her to be more understanding with him. Milady did not expect this. Esme couldn't believe that this was the Marquis's first relationship, and the maid confirmed it by saying that Alphonse had never asked any of the servants to serve someone in such a special way before. Obviously, it was because she became his first love. Milady clenched her fists a little, feeling guilty, because she thought that this was not the first time that the Marquis had this relationship. However, I was even happy about it. She so quickly took it into her head that this relationship was the first for both of them, that she forgot about everything in the world, did not even pay attention to the maid who wanted to recommend and give her some advice. Lillian quietly approached the lady and whispered something in her ear. Waynes jumped for joy and thanked the servant for the wonderful idea she had told her. The maid frowned a little. It was dinner time, and the future couple sat together at the table. The girl was very pleased with the recent events of today, and her mood was not hidden from the Marquis, as he pointed out. Alphonse asked what caused the lady to be in such a cheerful mood, to which she replied that she was simply looking forward to the ball, which was soon to come, and smiled. He replied the same. Midford, of course, had no idea what was going on in Milady's mind, but she knew that this time the ball would not be so simple, and was already looking forward to using Lillian's advice. The rest of the days passed rather quickly. It was already late in the evening on the street, but near the Emperor's palace there were only more carriages with guests of various status. The Marquis and Milady had also arrived and were already getting out of the carriage. The girl quickly realized that now was the best moment. She pretended to slip and started to fall. At the last moment, the Marquis managed to catch her. The boy was a little startled by the unexpectedness. He asked her if she was not hurt anywhere. The girl thanked him for catching her in time and said that everything was fine with her. She adjusted her dress and they went inside together. It was luxurious and light in the hall. It seemed that the girl had never seen such beauty, which she now saw before her eyes. Her spirit was taken away from admiration. In the end, she was able to say that it was nice here. Alphonse noticed the admiration of the bride and said that such activities were held quite often in the Imperial palace. So if the girl liked it so much, he promised to bring her here more often. Harrow began to call out to them, who noticed the couple almost immediately as soon as they entered. The girl also noticed the prince and told the Marquis that he could go and say hello to his friend. However, Alphonse didn't really want to leave her alone here. Milady began to insist and assured that nothing bad would happen to her. Besides, she wanted to try the talents of the Imperial confectioner. After some time, the girl began to look for him and noticed the already familiar lady whom she had met in the salon. She saw that the Marquis was again very friendly with her and did not understand it. However, she really didn't want to think about it, because whatever the reason, she definitely wouldn't let something bigger happen. Determined, Esmeralda began to seethe a little with anger. It's time to act. She was not going to delay it any longer, so it was quick. Inconspicuously, she approached the Marquis and wrapped her arms around him. With an evil smile, the girl greeted the infamous lady. The opponent, of course, noticed this childish movement, but it cannot be said that it made a strong impression on her. She sighed boredly and only asked who this girl was that had so brazenly grabbed the Marquis. Marquis did not want the girls to start arguing, so he decided to introduce them to each other. Roxane Artemisia calmly reacted to this, while Esmeralda was not very happy about it. At this moment, Prince Harrow noticed, unlike the Marquis, that a fight between the ladies could be about to begin, so he wedged himself between them, interrupting the acquaintance. He apologized for it and returned to Roxana. The prince politely kissed her hand but did not stay long, and approaching Alphonse told him to follow him. Marquis understood that this was something important, but informed Esme that he would be back soon. Wayne smiled at him, telling him to take his time. The girls were left alone, and Esmeralda wanted to use this to explain to her rival that Midford was her lover, but she did not react. Milady tried to explain again and admitted that they were already thinking about marriage, but this time Artemisia did not pay attention to it either. Instead, the lady said that she liked the Marquis. She assured that feelings are very changeable, so she will not back down and make the Marquis her own, because there was not a single man who would not be tempted by her beauty, so it is better to surrender to the rival. Esmeralda said a couple of phrases to this brat, but she herself was as angry as a dog. If it wasn't there, but Alphonse was her fiancé, but she knew that his feelings for her were not sincere, and that worried her. In a moment, these thoughts even made her feel lonely, because no matter what she did, her girlfriend could not make a person love her. However, she still wondered if the Marquise would ever treat her accordingly. Meanwhile, Midford and the Prince of Harrow came together to the Crown Prince, who was already waiting for them. The Marquis bowed politely in greeting His Majesty. He was thanked for a successfully completed task. The Marquis was pleasantly surprised by this, but did not want to accept thanks for it because such was his mission to the Emperor. The heir laughed a little, saying that he was too strict with himself. Suddenly, Darius said that he had heard about the Marquis's new bride. He confirmed and reported that he used this girl as one of the means to successfully complete the tasks given by the Emperor. The Crown Prince did not want to get involved in this relationship, so he told the Marquis to do what he thought necessary. But he hoped that in this relationship, he would still be able to find peace. Darius also gave the Marquis a letter written to him by the Emperor. Alphonse saw that it looked like a new order and thought it might be about the Black Iris faction, but it wasn't for sure. The prince also did not know what could be hidden in this letter. He only said that he was hoping for the Marquis. For Midford, it was an honor to carry out the Emperor's orders. Besides, he himself would like to deal with the enemies. When the comrades left the office, Garrow said that he thought his brother was overstepping the mark, because it was too complacent to rush to catch those who had been under investigation for years. However, the Marquis was sure that the heir had reasons for caution, and the letter could have more information about it. The younger prince wanted to open the letter, but he was not allowed to do so. Alphonse said he promised not to work today. The friend guessed that this promise was given to Esme. The prince was happy that his friend had a girlfriend, but the Marquis did not share his joy. The Marquis asked if the prince was so happy about it, then why wouldn't he start a relationship himself, to which Harrow replied that he couldn't do it because he was a national favorite, with whom the ladies had fallen in love at least once. Midford just smiled lightly at that. Nevertheless, he said that he would like to end this today because he has to join the Waynes. With that, they said goodbye and the Marquis went to look for a bride. However, he did not have to do this for a long time because Esmeralda herself came to the meeting and threw herself into his arms, regretting that she had waited so long for him. The Marquis apologized for the delay. Suddenly he smelled a strange aroma coming from the lady and immediately noticed that she was a little high. The guy asked about it and the girl admitted that she drank, but only a little. This made Alphonse laugh. He thought that the girl liked the place very much, but she began to object, as she had expected to spend the evening with him, but the Marquise began to engage in conversation with another lady, much to her disappointment. She clenched her fists and quietly asked the Marquis if he really considered her his girlfriend. The atmosphere at that time was kind of strange, and he wanted to say something, but he couldn't find the right words. When he started to say something, he did not have time to finish, because Roxana's voice was heard behind him, who said that she was glad to see the Marquis again, because she was worried that he might leave the ball because of work. The previous atmosphere between the future spouses finally collapsed, and Esmeralda looked displeased in the direction of her rival, who made the same gesture that was familiar to her. She grabbed the boy's hand. The girl deliberately ignored Esmeralda and tried her best to draw the Marquis's attention to her, saying that she would like to find a quiet place to talk with him. The Marquis did not have time to answer. As soon as he started to say something, someone suddenly pulled him by the other hand. Waynes was not going to back down and took a more difficult path. Pulling the Marquis closer, she kissed him on the cheek. The Marquis no longer offered any resistance, and the girl took advantage of this and began to pull him in the other direction, angrily telling her opponent that Alphonse was her fiancé. Roxana only gleefully nodded at this. In the end, the Marquis came to his senses and decided to take matters into his own hands. He pulled Esmeralda away and apologized to Artemisia for this incident, saying that his beloved drank a little too much and took her away. Roxana wanted to say something else to stop Midford, but the boy quickly went to the exit. Prince Harrow watched this situation from the second floor. He found her quite interesting. The Marquis helped Milady into the carriage and they drove home. While riding in the carriage, the girl slightly leaned against his shoulder and began to doze. Alphonse still could not forget the question she asked. However, he could not forget what he said to the prince, because for him, Esme was only a tool to fulfill the tasks given by the emperor. The guy asked the lady if she would stay with him, knowing his relationship. Unfortunately, the girl could not give any answer, and not even the fact that she heard this question. Arriving at the palace, he took her to the room. Milady did not want to wake up in the morning. She had a headache and was trying to remember what exactly had happened yesterday after meeting Alphonse. Remembering that she had kissed the Marquis when she was drunk, the girl hid herself in shame. Milady began to scold herself loudly for such actions. There was a knock on the room and the maid came in. Lillian brought breakfast and the lady had to get out from under the blanket, carefully pretending that everything was fine. While the girl began to eat breakfast, the maid said that she had a message from Alphonse. The Marquis invited Milady to drink tea together and asked how Esmeralda viewed it. The lady was a little moved. She thought the Marquis wanted to talk about her actions yesterday. The lady was a little late in answering, so the maid called her. The girl almost jumped up and quickly said that she accepted the invitation. The girl quickly began to dress and put herself in order. The Marquis invited her to his personal greenhouse, where the table was already set. Midford regretted not being able to spend more time with her yesterday. The girl didn't pay so much attention to it anymore because she chopped the firewood herself, so she had to admit that she drank a couple of cocktails yesterday. The Marquis laughed and told her that she did not know how to drink at all. The girl was very ashamed of what happened yesterday, but did not say anything more on this topic. Meanwhile, Marquis wanted to apologize for not being able to spend time together, so today's tea party was for that purpose. The lady was pleasantly surprised and started to thank her, but Alphonse interrupted her and asked if she still really wanted to test his feelings. Milady cursed at this question and told him to ignore it. He asked why she had so suddenly begun to renounce it. In the end, the girl said that the Marquis had always been nice to her, but that was confusing, because it made the boy suspicious. Hearing this, the Marquis frowned a little and clasped his hands. After a moment of silence, he finally quietly said that the girl was a very kind person. Milady began to wave away, because she knew that it was not quite so. The lady understood that she had to keep her mouth shut, so as not to accidentally reveal that she and Lillian had come up with that plan on the eve of the ball. With that, they ended the conversation and simply continued their tea. Meanwhile, in the evening of the same day, a lady from the Black Iris group tricked a strange man into captivity. He begged for mercy and to let him go, but the woman was adamant in her plan. She did not pay any attention to her husband's pleas, and suddenly a strange black fog began to swirl around her, which captured the stranger and began to suffocate her. When the matter was completed, a servant approached her. The young man cautiously said that he was impressed by the lady's abilities. The woman ordered to take the body and transfer it to the laboratory of Dr. Victoire, but the servant took his time, dancing on the spot. She looked away from the servants and looked at one of the roofs of the house, looking at the boss, to whom she had to inform about the completed task. However, it did not take long to search because he saw everything. However, he still had some business to do, which he did not dare to put off, so he immediately went to the Imperial Palace. There he met the one who had started it all, the elder Prince Diego. The prince was already very displeased with such a long wait, and asked how much longer he had to wait until the Black Iris fulfilled everything that had been agreed. The chief apologized, but asked to give a little more time. The task on which this group was currently working was not an easy one, but the prince was not satisfied with this delay, because he paid for it. He was told that additional problems were created by the Marquis. The elder prince emphasized that it was necessary to hurry because even the empress was not satisfied with their constant failures. Hearing about Her Majesty, the chief asked how she was doing. The prince warned that it was not necessary to mention the empress like that, and immediately got down to business, saying that it was necessary to concentrate on spreading even more chaos than before. It is necessary to make sure that the current order of affairs is shaken. The chief agreed and gave his word that Black Iris would do everything so that His Majesty Diego would eventually ascend the throne. They finished with that. Meanwhile, Alphonse did not give himself rest because he still had a lot of work, and every day it became even more. When he returned home, Esmeralda was already waiting for him. She was troubled by the news. The girl ran up and asked if he had heard about the news that had recently started going around the city. She was greatly disturbed by this, and the lady told about a werewolf that was apparently seen somewhere nearby. She also said that strange murders of women and men began to take place. The bodies were so mutilated as if they had been torn apart by some kind of animal. People were afraid that it was the work of this werewolf. The Marquis, of course, knew about these crimes because it was mentioned in the Emperor's letter he received a couple of days ago, so he was now on his way to His Majesty's palace to settle matters. Also, the Marquis said that although this was not officially said, he was sure that all this was the work of the Black Iris. Besides, she herself left behind evidence in the form of the flower itself. The girl wanted to say something, but Alphonse stopped her, saying that today they would go in search of this werewolf. The lady was somewhat surprised when he said the word we. He smiled. Of course, Esmeralda was not satisfied with this turn of events, but the Marquis slowly approached her, took her hands and said that he would need her help. She gave him a slightly angry look. It was evening. The streets were quiet and empty. According to the agreement, the lady dressed in fairly simple clothes so that no one would guess who she was and walked down the street, deliberately exposing herself to danger. Despite the fact that all this was agreed, she still felt a little scared walking alone. She remembered that the Marquis promised to be close to her and not to worry, but she did not want to be a bait. The girl continued to walk, and in her head she tried to calm herself down by the fact that Alphonse was next to her. Nevertheless, she could not help but notice that, despite the not-too-late hour, there were no people around. While she was walking, she tried to see at least someone, but it was still quiet around. The girl would not have heard how something approached her if she had not looked under her feet and noticed a strange shadow. She quickly turned around and noticed a healthy werewolf behind her who was no longer trying to hide and growled loudly. The girl was very frightened and could not move because of this. The beast did not delay because in the end it found its prey and wanted to finish it off as soon as possible. The werewolf swung and almost reached his goal. Milady shouted loudly, calling for the Marquis. Hearing her voice, Alphonse rushed to her in order to take her away from the disaster. In a fraction of a second, he rushed to Esmeralda and, covering her, quickly rushed at the beast, severely wounding it. He went back to her to make sure she was okay. The girl was unharmed, and he looked at the werewolf again, asking if he could speak, but the creature only growled in response. Marquis thought that the beast was going to attack him now, but the werewolf quickly jumped up the mountain, holding onto the ringlet where the hand was, and began to jump away from the houses, leaving the battlefield. Alphonse began to chase the enemy, not allowing him to disappear from the field of view, but the werewolf moved too fast, and it was still difficult for the Marquis to follow him. In the end, the animal was able to escape. Midford realized that the target had managed to escape, and there was no longer any point in pursuing him. Esmeralda quickly ran up to him. The girl was sure that this was the same werewolf that everyone was talking about. Marquis was sure that Dr. Victoire was behind the creation of this monster because he was the only one who was capable of it. The lady could not find the words to answer this, but it was not the first time she heard about him. Suddenly she felt very tired and began to fall back and almost fell. But the Marquis caught her at the last moment and asked how she was. Esme was still very scared and asked to come back. Once at home, Alphonse ordered the servants to bring soothing tea. Sitting in the room and sipping a warm drink, the girl was finally able to calm down a little, but there was porridge in her head and a bad mood. Esmeralda had no problem guessing that Black Iris was behind all this again. Strong anger suddenly took over her, because she could not understand what benefit this group would have. Although the Marquis had already spoken about it, he emphasized that there were people in this group who were not satisfied with the current order of the Emperor's position. He could not tell everything because he himself was not sure. However, he still continued and said that he was sure of one thing, namely that their primary task was to destroy the current order of affairs and bring chaos to society. The lady was wary. The girl replied that the lady did not understand either the goals or their achievements of the Black Iris. She asked if he was a werewolf. The one she saw was also created with the help of these inhuman experiments, and although Esmeralda guessed about it, the Marquis's words of confirmation angered her even more. She accused the doctor of taking the lives of innocent people, for which she will definitely not be forgiven. Alphonse said that he personally does everything possible to catch criminals, but for this he needs her help. The girl no longer denied anything, because now she herself understood and saw everything. She personally promised herself that she would do everything possible because she cannot allow people to continue living in this fear for so long. They both smiled after looking at each other. Nevertheless, today was already too late, and they both needed a good night's sleep because the day was not an easy one, and tomorrow the Marquis said that they would try to catch the werewolf again. Milady agreed. Having walked a long way to this castle, the werewolf barely swam along the sewer shaft, water sloshing under his paws, rats scurrying around. Finally, the beast began to climb the stairs through the corridor. The doctor was sitting in his office and feverishly writing something down in a scroll. The results he wrote did not satisfy him, and the man put down his pen, holding his head. Despair seemed to engulf him. When the werewolf entered the office, Victoire quickly raised his head. He saw what had happened to the beast, and forgetting all his problems, quickly jumped up and approached the monster. He quickly examined the unfortunate animal, trying to find out how this could happen. However, he did not expect to receive an answer, but immediately led the werewolf to his laboratory, promising to treat him. It was evening on the street, and Esmeralda yawned involuntarily. Alphonse, standing by the window, turned to her, realizing that the girl was tired, but she began to assure that everything was fine with her. However, Midford understood what with the night schedule, which had already lasted a week, it was not a sin to be tired. Nevertheless, the girl was, on the contrary, happy about it, because nothing bad happened during this week. Esmeralda even thought that this could mean the disappearance of the monster, but the Marquis was not so sure, because Black Iris was not one to retreat so quickly. He pondered. Marquis understood that the girl was already very tired, so I offered to rest today, but she did not like this idea and flatly refused. Besides, I also wanted to go together today. He had nothing to say to that, and he agreed. That night they did again what and everything else before that. The girl walked through the empty streets again and again, but this time she did not feel the approach of the enemy. However, Alphonse saw this and at the last moment managed to pick her up and jump to a safe place, because in a moment a werewolf landed where the girl was standing. Esme didn't expect this and was a little scared. Finally, the werewolf showed himself, but the girl suddenly saw that this time the beast was a little different. Both took a closer look and noticed that the doctor had made a new hand for the monster, which was sledgehammer-shaped. Marquis understood that this time the enemy became even more dangerous. Taking out his sword, he stepped forward and asked Esmeralda to stay behind him. The girl did not show any resistance. For a moment, both the Marquis and the werewolf stared at each other, neither of them about to back down. Both got ready, and Alphonse was the first to start advancing with lightning speed. Their weapons crossed, and a loud clang was heard. The Marquis jumped back and took a closer look. The werewolf remained unmoved, but his face formed something like a smile. Marquis realized that his blow did not cause any damage to the monster, and saw that he was going to have a very difficult battle, but he was not going to give up. The beast rose into the air, leaving only dust behind. Alphonse quickly got his bearings and noticed that the werewolf was targeting the girl again, so he quickly ran up to her and grabbed her hand and began to run to safety. Everything around shook. While they were running away, the Marquis could not believe that such power had appeared in a werewolf. Now he needed to be even faster than before. The lady suddenly called out to him, saying that she had an idea. She told him that he should have lured the beast to a place where there would be less room for him to maneuver. The girl pointed out that there was a small stream nearby, and they ran there. The lady hid behind the house. Esmeralda began to look like a monster, but he was nowhere to be seen, but she understood that he was somewhere not far away. The lady saw now a wonderful opportunity and ran towards the boat. Milady climbed onto the boat and felt the werewolf behind her as well, stepping on the boat as well. For a moment she was very scared, but she overcame her fear and started rocking the boat. The werewolf began to lose his balance and fall back. The girl shouted to the Marquis that this moment was very good for a blow, and she herself rushed at the monster and grabbed him. He growled. Esmeralda grabbed the monster and began to fall into the water with it. Second by second, the Marquis managed to chop down the beast. When the lady finally went under the water with him, a high wave arose. Plunging into the water, the girl closed her eyes tightly, but when she was underwater, she opened her eyes, not knowing whether the Marquis managed to do everything successfully. In a moment, she saw the werewolf disappearing into the darkness. In a minute, the girl rose to the surface coughing. In front of her stood a contented Alphonse, holding the severed head of a werewolf in his hands. The Marquis said they made it thanks to her. She was happy with the victory, but she wanted to get out of the water even more, so she offered her hand to the Marquis to help her get on land. The boy did so while praising her for her excellent display of skills. The girl could not believe that all these words were for her. Nevertheless, she remembered that the Marquis had also saved her, so she blushed a little and hurried to thank him for that. A strong and cold wind blew sharply. Esmeralda covered herself with orphans and began to sneeze. Marquis quickly took off his jacket and threw it over the girl. The lady was pleasantly surprised by such a gesture, and she looked at him with gratitude in her eyes. In response, he smiled benevolently, knowing that such a gesture did not require thanks. He extended his hand to the girl. Now they could go back, because the mission was successfully completed. The lady followed. The next morning, Esmeralda did not feel better. On the contrary, she realized that she had caught a cold. There was a knock at the door, and the girl thought it was a maid, but to her surprise, Alphonse came. He asked permission if he could come in for a while. Of course, the girl did not mind, so she immediately invited him. When the Marquis came in, he looked like a fresh cucumber. Yesterday's events did not affect him. Midford approached the bed and lightly touched her forehead. In a moment, he noticed that the lady's face was still very red and her forehead was burning, but Esmeralda began to say that she was fine. The girl did not want to focus more on her well-being and decided to change the subject, asking Alphonse to tell if everything went well with the task. The Marquis sat down next to him. He said that he had just returned from a visit to the Imperial Palace. He also said that after showing His Majesty the trophy they had won, he immediately handed it over to the police. The boy said that for the people, everything will remain as if all these crimes were committed by wolves and not by a werewolf. The girl fell silent for a moment, thinking about it. In a moment, she clapped her hands. The Marquis did not share the girl's joy. He also wanted to say that despite the satisfactory result, he did not know how she could have come up with such an idea, because it was quite dangerous. She smiled guiltily. The lady replied that she only wanted to help. Marquis knew about this, but still told her to worry more about her safety, because as her lover, he was worried about her. The boy lightly touched her hand. In a moment, he quickly got up and announced that he would go to the office, because he still had to deal with the documents of the Imperial Palace. The girl stopped him and asked if he would like to have dinner together. The Marquis happily agreed and left. When the door closed behind him, the girl quickly crawled under the blanket. Alphonse's words made a good impression on her, and she began to admire it with satisfaction. And when she remembered that he told her that he was worried about her, she almost started to pass out on the bed from happiness. The girl made such a noise that it seemed as if the cold had no effect on her. Walking down the corridor, the Marquis stopped for a moment and turned to look at the door of her room. It wasn't that he wasn't going to use the lady in his plans, he thought, but this time it was dangerous. The girl came to the dinner already in good health. She asked the Marquis if he was not supposed to go to the Imperial Palace today. The guy assured that he was done with business for today. Realizing that this was a great opportunity, the girl asked if he would like to go with her to a new cafe where they baked wonderful sweets. Hearing this, the Marquis was not much charmed by this thought. However, the girl was quite fascinated by it, so she began to tell what kind of pastries and cakes were baked there, focusing on her favorites and those that she would like to try with joy. The eyes were burning. The girl continued to assure him to go together, because it had been a while since the last incident, and Alphonse had been working all the time, so let him give himself time to rest. In the end, the boy agreed. While the Marquis and Milady were having fun talking, the butler was watching them from afar. He seemed to listen to their every word, but they did not notice it. The man turned sharply. It was a sunny day outside. As agreed, the Marquis went with Esmeralda to visit the new cafe. Having found herself in front of the door of the building, the girl looked at this small restaurant with admiration. Approaching, Midford clarified whether they had made a mistake with the institution, but the girl assured that everything was correct. She began to dance with impatience and told the Marquis to open the door quickly. When they went inside, the girl quickly began to look around. The beauty of this place captivated her completely. There were visitors sitting around, so there was a small commotion in the hall. Lady began to look for free seats. The lady found one place that fit perfectly into this cafe. The table was by the window, and Esme immediately pointed to it. The Marquis did not resist, and they sat down together. A waiter approached them. The man gave them a menu and specified what they would like to order. The Marquis immediately made a request, and the girl, hearing this, was genuinely surprised that he remembered the name of the cake she loved very much. The waiter wrote everything down and asked if there would be any other wishes for the order. The Marquis asked the girl if she would drink anything. Esme ordered cherry juice and her boyfriend ordered black coffee. Closing the menu, Alphonse gave it to the waiter and also ordered every kind of cake that their pastry chef would recommend. The waiter bowed as he took the order. The girl was very happy about this. When the waiter left them, the Marquis looked at the girl and said that since they had already come here, it was worth enjoying this moment to the fullest. Milady almost died of joy. After some time, their order was brought to them. Everything looked so appetizing that the girl could not resist for a second not to pounce on the sweets. Taking a fork in her hands, she got ready. Esmeralda tasted the first cake she saw. As soon as he touched her tongue, the girl almost took off on wings. The cake turned out to be so delicious that she couldn't believe it was real. Seeing the satisfied face of the bride, the Marquis asked her if it was delicious. The lady could not find words to describe it and wanted him to taste the cake too. Alphonse refused at first, but finally gave in. When he tasted the cake, the girl asked how he liked it. The Marquis lightly removed the remains of the cream from his face and admitted that it was very tasty. The lady fell back in her chair and the fork fell. Finally, they finished with all the goodies they ordered and went outside for a little walk. Both had a delicious meal, and the girl thanked the Marquis for this pleasant time. He had a good time too. The girl wanted to go back to the palace, but the Marquis stopped her, recommending to continue the walk, because he remembered that he once promised her a date. Milady smiled at that. The girl took him by the hand, and he offered to explore the center of the city. Esmeralda could not contain her joy and agreed without objection. Then they went where only their eyes could see and their feet could carry. They came to a small fountain and sat down to cool off. We went to the platform where an unknown dancer was performing. Look into different shops. The Marquis even gave Esme a bouquet of flowers. They returned home when the sun had almost set. While riding in the carriage, the girl openly admitted that she had had a lot of fun today. The lady breathed in the aroma of the gifted flowers. The Marquis was very happy that today had brought so much pleasure to my lady, so he suggested that from time to time he should find an opportunity to take walks as now. The girl was very happy about this. Upon their return, the butler met them. After saying hello, the girl couldn't stop herself and wanted to show her husband the flowers that the Marquis had given her. The servant was very happy about this and said that they were fitting for the lady. Satisfied with the butler's words, the girl went on, hugging the flowers. Alphonse asked the servant if everything was fine in the palace during their absence. The man said that a guest had arrived at the Marquis. The butler said that the guest was waiting in the living room, but Harrow was impatient as usual, so he was already coming down to meet the couple with a friendly raised hand. The girl was somewhat surprised to see the prince. Esmeralda greeted His Majesty by bowing and apologized for making him wait for them. The prince waved it off, saying that all this was not worth such formalities. Alphonse turned to his friend and asked him why he had decided to visit them today. The prince assured that it was nothing serious and took out a letter with an invitation. He announced that there would be a banquet in the palace. The emperor was holding this event in honor of the birthday of Harrow's older brother, Prince Diego, so he personally extended the invitation to the Marquis as Darius requested. Midford accepted the letter in silence. At this point, the prince decided to leave without detaining his friends, but insisted that Esmeralda also come to the banquet. The girl was genuinely surprised by this, but promised to come. Finally, the door closed behind him. The girl looked at the closed door in surprise for some time. Finally, she said that she was looking forward to the banquet, but the Marquis quickly restrained the girl and said that this was no simple invitation. The girl was wary. The Marquis invited the lady to a cup of tea. Sitting on the balcony, he began to explain, but decided to start from the very beginning. He said that Princes Diego and Darius had different mothers. The girl knew about it and said that the crown prince was from the late Empress Marinella, and the younger one was the first son of the current Empress Regina. Marquis confirmed the correctness of the information. However, the Marquis continued and said that this information was not officially covered anywhere because, in fact, there were some problems with the awarding of the title of Crown Prince. Esmeralda was very surprised by this. Alphonsus continued and said that the emperor himself wanted to make Darius his heir, but the current empress was of course against it and thought that her son deserved this title. The boy continued to tell. He said that from that moment a considerable scandal broke out in the imperial palace, as a result of which the title was still given to the very first son of the emperor. However, of course, the second son was not satisfied with such a schedule, and it lasted until today. Esmeralda finally understood now what the emperor was actually holding this banquet for. She thought that the emperor himself wanted to show with this action that Diego's resistance was in vain. The Marquis exhaled and said that any person who had any general knowledge of the situation would have thought so. However, the Crown Prince's true intentions were completely different. He wanted to let the other nobles know that his younger brother's support was in vain. The girl gradually began to understand everything. She also understood that this situation brought a lot of inconvenience. Marquis confirmed. Nevertheless, for some reason, the lady was sure that nothing bad would happen during the celebration. Noticing the girl's slight smile, he somewhat reassured himself that everything could really go well. Esmeralda was immediately distracted by the fact that she needed to choose a new dress for the imperial ball. When the Marquis heard about the girl's true feelings, he couldn't help but burst out laughing. The lady was a little embarrassed by this and began to excuse herself by saying that she had never been to such events before. When the Marquis stopped laughing, he already in a serious tone offered Milady to go together to the salon to choose a dress and promised to help with this. The girl was pleasantly surprised and glad to hear it. She was sincerely grateful to him for such an offer. Also, the girl began to hope that she would once again have the opportunity to go on another date with the groom. At this, they continued to drink tea in silence. Finally, this long-awaited moment came and she got to the real imperial ball. His Majesty's palace was unsurpassed and the guests had already begun to celebrate. The girl was quite excited. While she was looking around, Harrow approached the couple and called to them. The girl immediately greeted with a slight bow. The prince also asked himself how things were going with her during the time when they last met. The Marquis, in turn, asked how things were going with Darius. The prince replied that his elder brother was busy with preparations for the arrival of a foreign delegation, so he would not be able to attend the ball.